This is going to be a massively biased review because I love this game. A lot. I don't even know if this can be called a review. It's actually going to be more of a history lesson about me and the Shin Megami Tensei universe at large. Persona 3 was my introduction to the Persona multiverse, and it holds a special place in my heart forever. I've purchased it a total of 3 times in my life, 4 if you count Reloaded even though I'm playing it on Game Pass. While it was not my first Shin Megami Tensei style game, that honor goes to SMT Nocturne, it absolutely is the one that made me a lifelong fan through the good and the bad, and the only bad I can think of is Soul Hackers 2. Today, I have played every version of every post-Persona 3 game. However, Persona 1 and 2 are not super fun. They aged about as well as Parasite Eve, and before you click off the video in rage, keep in mind that I didn't play those games when I was younger. And on a fresh playthrough in the 20-teens, 2020s, with no nostalgia attached, they just don't hold up very well. But moving on, I've played Persona 3 3 times and beaten it twice at this point, having not been able to finish Persona 3 Portable. Lastly, my Persona 3 Reloaded playthrough was done on Merciless, so keep that in mind.
Thanks, Lofter. I'll take it from here. So, what makes Persona 3 so special compared to the other games of the PS2 era, like Final Fantasy X or Dragon Quest VIII? A bit of it was, of course, the darkness of it all. The story borders on horror in a lot of circumstances, and the whole kids shooting themselves in the head thing really caused a lot of buzz at the time. But the reason we fell in love with the game was because it was pretty much entirely focused on the characters, bordering on a visual novel at times. Not just the main cast of Persona users and their villains, it goes so much deeper than that. Every social link you can acquire has a fairly extensive background story, and a story that you help play out if you so choose. From the old couple in the bookstore whose child has died, to the mysterious player in the MMO that you can build a relationship with, every character has so much depth. And that has been a mainstay in the series ever since. But even then, most of the NPCs in the game have a story behind them that has a beginning, middle, and end. The girl in the hallway who's crushing on Mitsuru, the girl who is trying to build up the courage to talk to her crush, thinking he's unaware. Meanwhile, he's totally aware she's stalking him and wants to mess with her a little. If you have the time and want, the world feels alive. It's something the series is known for, and honestly, we can't think of a single game that has that living and breathing atmosphere, where parts are constantly moving and changing throughout the game's life cycle. Part of the reason for that is because the Persona games stay so localized. Each game takes place in a space with fairly limited locations you can visit. And rightfully so, since it's about teenagers in our modern society. Of course they are going to be limited to their town, and occasionally adjacent cities. And when you keep your playable world that small, you get the freedom to build it to a fine point. In most RPGs, you travel an entire world, and it's rare you visit old towns and locations outside of random fetch quests that you might get here and there. But in Persona, every day you walk down your school halls. Every day you visit the mall or June's and other standard locations, and those areas get time to live and breathe, even if you don't choose to notice them. And that is what makes the Persona franchise so special. It's alive and evolving and interconnected, and it's just wonderful. I truly hope they remake Persona 4. Speaking of the remake, let's talk about that. The first thing you'll notice is the style. Persona 3 had a much darker style than 4 or 5 and was almost much more serious for the most part. Persona 4 made it a bit more lighthearted and silly at times, and Persona 5 just went straight up anime. Persona 3 still feels very grounded, but they updated the menus and UI to align more with Persona 5, and justifiably so. I think P5 might have sold a few thousand copies to non-JRPG players just because of how damn stylish the game is. When you open up your menus on Persona 3 and that water motif kicks in, and you change menus and the graphics move smoothly with the menus, it's beautiful. Another big change is the actual game's character models. Gone are the borderline chibi models of old, replaced with slick new 3D models that have active facial expressions on the models. This may not seem like that big of a deal, but at first, I didn't even notice. Persona games tend to play out in a visual novel style, using character portraits with text boxes to show facial expressions. And Persona 3 Reloaded does still do that, but if you look at the character models, they also make the expressions and movements. I almost wish there was a way to just turn off the dialogue boxes and let the game speak for itself, but that is totally unnecessary and not worth docking points over. Overall, the game is beautiful, 10 times more so if you've played any of the previous versions. The second thing you might notice is, it's Persona 3. This is not a Final Fantasy Remake situation where you're going to get fooled into a sequel or whatever the hell Squeenix is doing over there, which I do love, don't misunderstand me. This is just an actual remake, damn near one-to-one. There are mechanical changes, which I will get to shortly, but the story is mostly untouched. A few characters get a little bit more story, but overall it's exactly what you remember it to be. It's just more fun. That's right, it's more fun. Why? Well, for starters, they took another page out of the Persona 5 book and added in damaging dark and light attacks. While you do get the Mudo and Hama skills you know and love, we now get access to the Kua and Ea skill line as well. This, of course, means the enemies do too, so Homunculus will not save you from getting slapped around by those elements. Another big change is you get full control of your characters, allowing you to actually plan out a strategy and execute on it with all of your characters instead of just hoping for the best. That's right, folks, the Marin Kaden meme is finally dead. The addition of the damaging light and dark spells greatly increases the viability of the dark and light Persona users in the game, and makes one of them kinda busted, but in the best way possible because of who it is. Dark and fire skills. It also feels like status effects have a higher chance of landing. There are fun AI gimmicks with many of the mini-bosses, and all in all, Persona 3 Reloaded renders the original game nearly obsolete, outside of the fact that it does not include the answer from FES or FemC from Persona 3 Portable. Also, you can actually use your navigator's MP, which is awesome, and something we have wanted for literally 20 years. Not only can she fully scan an enemy after the party takes one full round of actions, but she can also stealth your party in Tartarus to help you avoid combat and has many other abilities as well. In addition to that, your party also gets a special move called Thurgy that can only be described as limit breaks, which keeps into the theme of the Persona franchise by tying the rate they gain meter for those new abilities tied into their personality. As an example, when Mitsuru lands a status effect, she gains Thurgy meter, while Junpei gains meter faster by landing critical attacks. The leader gains them by using his persona, and his moves are actually his old fusion techniques, meaning you can still use Jack Brothers without actually having Pyro and Frost in your party. You just have to have owned them both at one point to unlock the skill. That's right. That means you have permanent access to cadenza. The third thing you might notice is the music, because that's always a gigantic part of these games. It's outstanding how hearing a specific song long after the game has ended can pull you back in mentally, putting you back in Gekkoukan High or Paulina Mall, or the midst of a chaotic and difficult battle, or even make you tear up over a fond or painful memory. Persona 3 will engrave itself into your heart, and the music will light those wounds up. And there is, of course, His Majesty himself, Lotus Juice, who not only has returned and remixed some of the old songs, but created entirely new ones for your auditory sense to bathe in. The Persona games have never cut corners, and they don't start here. When I first booted the game, I was a little disappointed that it didn't begin with Burn My Dread, but I was quickly sold on the new theme, which also successfully references the old one. As for the story, in case you're a newcomer and do not know it, we really do not want to spoil it too much. It's phenomenal, with its twists and turns and tragedies and laughter and tears. I almost envy you, because you get to have this experience for the first time. The general description will have to suffice. Upon arriving to his new home and dorms, our protagonist is accidentally exposed to the Dark Hour, a hidden hour between 12 o'clock and 12:01 a.m. that most normal humans never experience. During this time, the vast majority of the population sleeps inside a coffin that manifests itself around them and keeps them safe from the shadows, monsters who feed on the human psyche. The protagonist is shockingly unfazed by this, and proceeds to his new dorm where he meets a young child that asks him to sign a contract. Assuming this has something to do with the dorms, he agrees. Shortly after that, the Dark Hour ends, everything returns to normal, and he meets his new dorm mates, Mitsuru and Yukari. Turns out, his new dorms seem to be unisex, which, like most things, totally does not bother our hero. He spends a few days at school getting used to his new life, when one night he is woken up by Yukari in a panic during the Dark Hour. She hands him a sword, and together they escape to the roof of the building, where they are attacked by a giant shadow with dozens of hands and knives to go with them. Battle ensues, and from there, you'll have to see for yourself. Persona 3 can run up past 100 hours depending on your familiarity with the battle system and story, so there is a lot to cover. We haven't, nor will we, discuss Persona Fusion, fusion attacks, or any other of the myriad of mechanics involved with the game, because I'm 100% sure if you're watching this video, you will go play the game, and the game itself offers a nice, fast tutorial on all of these things. Persona 3 Reloaded is outstanding. Beyond outstanding. It is quite literally one of the best JRPGs of all time, easily in the top 10, and possibly even in the top 5. While my favorite game in the franchise is probably Persona 4, it's not because Persona 3 Reloaded is lagging anything. I just like the lighthearted detective story a bit more than the gritty story about the fall. With the updated UI and gameplay mechanics backing up an already unforgettable and engaging story, Persona 3 is a must-buy for anyone who loves JRPGs, Persona 5, or just a good story. And once you're done, check out the rest of the games in the Shin Megami Tensei universe. We highly recommend SMT5, Digital Devil Saga 1 and 2, Devil Summoner 1 and 2, and Devil Survivor 1 and 2. We give Persona 3 Reloaded a 10 out of 10 and a gold star of approval, which is not something I've ever even considered, but I don't know a way to give a game a higher than a 10 otherwise. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing. And tell us what your favorite SMT Multiverse game is. We'd love to hear it, as long as it's not Soul Hackers 2. If it's Soul Hackers 2, just leave that subscribe button alone.
Deuces, dummies.